Setting up a recall on Cubase instrument tracks has to work a bit differently, because if you take a look at the inspector on the left of an instrument track, you'll see that instrument tracks don't actually have any of those MIDI sends that were used to set up a recall on normal MIDI tracks. So to solve this, Composer Tools Pro comes with a simple VST3 plugin called MK Recall Trigger. Let me show you how this works. I'll open up the mixer, and on the instrument track that I want to recall, I'll just create an instance of the plugin. You can find it under Tools. If you don't see the plugin in the list here, just make sure you've installed it correctly into your VST3 plugins folder. So the plugin itself is basically self-explanatory, just a drop-down menu to select the recall address for the track. But the way the plugin actually communicates to Composer Tools Pro is via MK Connect. So when the recall message is received by the plugin, it sends it off to MK Connect, which then broadcasts it to all connected tablets that are running Composer Tools Pro. Now, there's just one more step that we have to take care of, and that's because a VST plugin in the rack can't just simply receive MIDI from a track directly. So you can't just record enable the instrument track and have MIDI pass through to MK Recall Trigger. However, what you can do is use Cubase's powerful generic remote feature to control plugin parameters remotely. And Composer Tools Pro, of course, comes with a generic remote file to do this. If you've never used generic remotes before, it's really very simple, and I'll show you right now. So to set that up, just go to Studio, Studio Setup, and on earlier versions of Cubase, this was called Devices, Device Setup. Click the plus button at the top left to add a new device, and add a new generic remote. And just import the MK Recall Trigger remote file that came with Composer Tools Pro. And finally, just set the remote's MIDI input to the MIDI output from Composer Tools Pro. And in my studio, I'm connected via Daemon 0, but of course you can use whatever other MIDI connections you have available in your studio. And that's it. MK Recall Trigger is all set up. So when a track that has the plugin is selected, and it receives the recall message at the top, CC127, it will be remotely passed into the plugin, and the effect will be triggered. And that's all really that generic remotes are. They just allow you to remotely control different parts of Cubase using external MIDI devices. Now, the only thing you have to be careful of is that the MK Recall Trigger plugin must be in the same rack position on all of your instrument tracks in your project. And that's because the generic remote file relies on knowing the position of the MK Recall Trigger plugin in your VST rack. Because you can see here in the value action column that the remote file says insert 1 MK Recall Trigger. Now, if you want to move the plugin to a different position in your rack, that's fine. Just make sure you have it in the same position on all of your tracks. And then all you have to do is just come back into the remote and update it. So you can see here now MK Recall Trigger is appearing in the second slot in the inserts rack. And so that's it. Now you can take advantage of Cubase's fantastic disabled instrument tracks feature to save RAM. And when you re-enable the track, all of your settings will be saved along with it. And that's all there is to setting up a recall on instrument tracks in Cubase.